Sometimes a single phone call can reveal that the people you trusted most have been quietly destroying your life for years. The call came on a gray Tuesday morning while I was sitting at my kitchen table, stirring a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. At 68 years old, my days followed a predictable rhythm. I watered the flowers on my front porch, read the local paper, and enjoyed the peace that came with living alone. That morning felt no different until my cell phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Mrs. Nancy Walker?" a professional voice asked when I answered. "This is Karen from First Horizon Financial Services. We're calling regarding your delinquent loan balance." I frowned and adjusted my reading glasses. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think you have the wrong person." There was a brief pause. Then she confirmed my full name, my date of birth, and my address. Every detail was correct. "The outstanding balance is approximately $100,000, she continued politely. "We're trying to discuss repayment options before further action is taken." For a moment, I honestly thought it was some kind of scam. $100,000? I had never borrowed that kind of money in my life. My small home was paid off. My car was 7 years old. I used one credit card and paid it every month. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I never applied for a loan." The woman sounded sympathetic. "Mrs. Walker, according to our records, the loan was approved 3 years ago." 3 years ago. I stared through my kitchen window at the maple tree in my backyard. The leaves moved gently in the wind. Everything outside looked calm. Inside, my stomach began to tighten. "Can you send me copies of the paperwork?" I asked. "Of course," she replied. "I can email them immediately." When the call ended, I sat motionless for several minutes. The coffee beside me remained untouched. My hands felt strangely cold. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. A clerical error. Mixed records. Someone entering the wrong social security number. Something simple. Something harmless. 10 minutes later, the email arrived. I opened the first document and felt my pulse quicken. There was my name. There was my address. There was my social security number. Page after page carried information that belonged to me. Then I reached the signature page. The signature looked like mine at first glance, but it wasn't. Someone had practiced it. Someone had copied it carefully enough to fool a lender. I felt a chill move through me. This was not a mistake. This was deliberate. I continued scrolling through the documents, searching for anything that could explain what I was seeing. Then I found a section listing emergency contacts and supporting references. My eyes stopped on a familiar name. Claire Walker, my younger sister. I blinked and read it again. Claire Walker, the same sister who called every Sunday. The same sister who shared Thanksgiving dinners with me. The same sister my mother always described as a little misunderstood. My chest felt heavy. Surely there had to be another explanation. Maybe she had been listed accidentally. Maybe she had nothing to do with it. But deep down, a quiet voice was already whispering a truth I didn't want to hear. I opened another attachment, then another, and with every page, the possibility of innocence grew smaller. By noon, my untouched breakfast still sat on the table. The coffee was completely cold, and for the first time in my life, I began to wonder if the greatest threat to my future had never been a stranger at all. That evening, I drove across town to my mother's house with a folder full of printed documents sitting on the passenger seat beside me. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold, but I barely noticed. My thoughts kept circling the same question. How had Claire's name ended up connected to a loan that carried my information? I had known my sister for 64 years. We had shared bedrooms as children, family vacations, holiday dinners, and countless ordinary moments that make up a lifetime. Yet as I gripped the steering wheel, I felt as though I were driving toward a stranger. My mother, Dorothy, answered the door wearing her usual light blue sweater. At 88, she moved more slowly than she once had, but her eyes remained sharp. She smiled when she saw me. "Nancy, you should have called first." Normally, I would have hugged her. That night, I walked inside without returning the smile. The familiar scent of lavender filled the hallway. Family photographs lined the walls. Claire appeared in nearly all of them. Claire at her high school graduation. Claire holding her first apartment keys. Claire standing beside my mother at birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. I had never paid much attention to that before. We settled into the living room. My mother folded her hands and looked at me carefully. "What is wrong?" she asked. I placed the documents on the coffee table. "I received a call from a lender this morning. Her expression changed so slightly that another person might not have noticed. But I did. The movement lasted only a second. A brief tightening around her eyes. Then it was gone. "A lender?" she asked. "They say I owe $100,000. Silence filled the room. The grandfather clock near the dining room ticked steadily. I watched her face. She looked down at the papers before finally speaking. "I see." Not surprise. Not confusion. Not shock. Just 3 quiet words. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "You already knew?" I said softly. My mother looked toward the window. "Nancy, things are not always as simple as they seem." That was not a denial. My heart sank. "How long have you known?" She hesitated. "Claire has been struggling for a while." I stared at her. "That is not what I asked." The clock continued ticking. Finally, she sighed. She told me there were financial problems. I leaned back against the couch, feeling suddenly exhausted. "And you never thought to tell me?" I did not know all the details. Her voice remained calm. Too calm. "But you knew enough." My mother rubbed her hands together. "Your sister has made mistakes." Mistakes. The word landed heavily between us. Not deception. Not fraud. Not betrayal. Mistakes. The same word she had used throughout our childhood whenever Claire caused trouble. A broken promise was a mistake. Unpaid bills were a mistake. Hurt feelings were a mistake. There was always another explanation. Another excuse. Another reason Claire deserved understanding. I opened the folder and slid one of the documents toward her. "My information is on every page." My mother barely glanced at it. Then she said something that chilled me more than the phone call ever had. "Please do not involve the police, Nancy. She is still your sister." The drive home felt longer than usual. Streetlights flickered on one by one as dusk settled over the town, but I barely noticed them. My mother's words repeated in my mind with every mile. "She is still your sister." Not "I am sorry." Not "this is terrible." Not "how can I help you." Just a reminder of where her loyalty belonged. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes with the engine off. The house was quiet. The porch light cast a warm glow across the front steps. For most of my life, I had believed that home was where confusion faded and things made sense. That night, it felt like the only place where I could begin asking the questions I had avoided for years. Inside, I spread the loan documents across my dining room table. The same table where I had hosted Thanksgiving dinners, birthday cakes, and Christmas breakfasts. I studied every page carefully. Dates, addresses, account numbers, references. The more I read, the less this looked like a single bad decision. It looked organized, planned, patient. I opened a notebook and began writing down every detail that seemed unusual. Within an hour, a pattern started to emerge. Certain addresses appeared more than once. Certain phone numbers repeated throughout different forms. Then something else caught my attention. One mailing address listed on an application looked strangely familiar. I knew I had seen it before, but I could not remember where. I stared at it for several minutes. Finally, the memory surfaced. About 8 years earlier, a tax document had failed to arrive at my house. At the time, I assumed it had been lost in the mail. A few weeks later, another financial statement had gone missing. Then a replacement credit card had arrived late. None of those events seemed important on their own. Life was busy back then. My husband was still alive. We were caring for my father during his final illness. Small inconveniences were easy to dismiss. But now those memories returned with uncomfortable clarity. I walked to my filing cabinet and began searching through old records. Dust coated some of the folders. Hours passed. The clock in the hallway struck 10, then 11. Finally, buried inside an old tax file, I found a photocopy of a document from years ago. My eyes moved immediately to the address printed near the top. It was the same address. My hands became still. That address had been connected to my information long before the loan ever existed. Suddenly, dozens of forgotten moments began fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. A utility account that briefly appeared on my credit report before disappearing. A bank letter addressed to me that contained information I did not recognize. A store credit application that had been denied even though I never applied. For years, I had explained away each incident. For years, I had trusted that there was an innocent reason. Now I was no longer sure. Near midnight, I leaned back in my chair and looked around the silent room. The evidence was not complete yet, but one thing had become painfully clear. Whatever had happened had not started 3 years ago. It had started much earlier. And for the first time, I began to wonder how many people already knew the truth besides me. The next morning I woke after only a few hours of sleep. The notebook still sat open on the dining room table exactly where I had left it. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating stacks of papers that now seemed to tell the story of an entirely different life. I made breakfast out of habit, but after a few bites I pushed the plate away. My appetite had disappeared somewhere between the lender's phone call and my mother asking me to protect the person who appeared to have caused all of this. Instead, I poured another cup of coffee and opened my laptop. For years I had checked my bank accounts online, paid bills electronically, and filed taxes through secure websites. Like most people my age, I trusted that those systems would alert me if something was seriously wrong. Now I wondered how much I had missed. I decided to request a complete copy of my credit history. While waiting for the report to become available, I began organizing every document I could find. Old tax returns, bank statements, insurance records, utility bills, anything that might reveal a pattern. Around noon, my credit report arrived. I opened it slowly, almost afraid of what I might discover. At first, everything looked ordinary. Then I noticed accounts I did not recognize. Some had been closed years earlier. Others existed for only a few months before disappearing. None carried balances large enough to attract immediate attention. Yet together they formed a trail. Small applications, temporary accounts, brief inquiries. It was as if someone had been testing doors before finding one that finally opened. My eyes moved from date to date. Several entries appeared during periods when Claire had been experiencing financial difficulties. I remembered family conversations about overdue rent, job changes, and unexpected expenses. Each time, my mother had stepped in. Each time, there was an explanation. Looking back, I realized how often those explanations had arrived before anyone asked questions. Late that afternoon, I called the lender again. This time I was connected to a fraud specialist named Michael Hayes. His voice was calm and professional. He listened carefully as I explained what I had found. When I finished, there was a brief silence. Then he said something that made my heart sink. "Mrs. Walker, based on what you are describing, I would recommend reviewing more than just this loan." I tightened my grip on the phone. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes these situations involve multiple accounts over an extended period of time." Multiple accounts. Extended period of time. The words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. By evening, I had converted my dining room into a temporary investigation center. Papers covered nearly every surface. Sticky notes marked dates and account numbers. A legal pad contained pages of observations. The deeper I looked, the less isolated the problem appeared. Then I noticed something that stopped me cold. One document contained a signature that looked remarkably similar to mine. Another contained a slightly different version. A third used an older form of my signature that I had not used in years. Someone had not copied my handwriting once. Someone had studied it. I sat back in my chair and stared at the wall. Outside, darkness settled over the neighborhood. Inside, another realization settled over me. Whoever had done this knew far more about my life than any stranger possibly could. The following weekend, I found myself thinking less about financial records and more about childhood memories I had not visited in years. It happened while sorting through an old storage box in the hall closet. Inside were photo albums, school report cards, and faded birthday cards written in careful handwriting. I sat on the living room floor and slowly turned the pages. There was Claire at age 8 holding a new bicycle. Claire at 12 smiling beside a birthday cake. Claire at 16 standing proudly with a learner's permit. In nearly every photograph, my mother stood beside her with the same expression of admiration. Looking at those pictures, I began noticing something I had ignored for most of my life. Whenever Claire made a mistake, someone stepped in to soften the consequences. If she forgot an obligation, there was an explanation. If she missed a payment, there was assistance. If she disappointed someone, there was a reason everyone should understand. Back then I never questioned it. Families were complicated. People needed help sometimes. That was what I told myself. Yet now, sitting among decades of memories, I started seeing a pattern that stretched far beyond a single loan application. I remembered Claire borrowing money from relatives and promising repayment that never quite arrived. I remembered my mother quietly paying bills during difficult periods and insisting nobody mention it. I remembered conversations ending abruptly whenever finances became part of the discussion. One memory surfaced more clearly than the others. About 15 years earlier, Claire had called me in tears because she was behind on rent. I had written a check the very next day. She thanked me repeatedly and promised to pay me back within 6 months. The repayment never came. When I eventually asked about it, she became embarrassed and my mother encouraged me to let it go. Family should not keep score, she had said. At the time, I agreed. Now I wondered how many similar conversations had occurred with other people. Later that afternoon, I reviewed several bank statements that Michael Hayes had suggested I examine. Buried among ordinary transactions were clues I had overlooked for years. Small verification deposits, temporary account connections, activity that seemed insignificant by itself but suspicious when viewed together. The deeper I looked, the more uncomfortable I became. It was as though someone had been operating just below the level of visibility, careful enough to avoid attention but persistent enough to leave traces behind. Near sunset, my phone rang. The caller identification showed my mother's number. I considered letting it ring, but eventually answered. Her voice sounded gentle. Too gentle. She asked how I was doing and whether I had been getting enough rest. Then, after several minutes of small talk, she carefully shifted the conversation toward Claire. She spoke about stress, financial hardship, poor decisions, regret. Yet she never once asked what this situation had done to me. She never asked whether my retirement savings were at risk. She never asked how it felt to discover my identity had been used without my knowledge. When the call ended, I sat quietly in my chair. Outside, the last light of day disappeared behind the trees. Inside, a realization settled over me with surprising clarity. For years I had believed the problem was Claire's behavior. Now I was beginning to understand that someone had been protecting that behavior for decades. And without that protection, none of this might have happened at all. 2 days later, I decided that guessing was no longer enough. I needed facts. Until then, most of what I had uncovered came from old records, forgotten memories, and troubling patterns. What I needed now was confirmation. I called Michael Hayes and asked what steps were available if I believed my personal information had been used without my authorization. He explained the process carefully. There would be formal reports, document reviews, verification requests, and an investigation into the accounts connected to my identity. His calm professionalism gave me something I had not felt since that first phone call: direction. For nearly a week, my life settled into a strange routine. Every morning, I gathered paperwork. Every afternoon, I answered questions, reviewed records, and searched through another layer of documents. The process was exhausting, but it also brought clarity. The more information that surfaced, the harder it became to dismiss what had happened as a misunderstanding. Then came the day I organized everything into a single binder. I placed loan records in one section, credit reports in another, copies of signatures in a third. When I finished, the binder was nearly 3 inches thick. I carried it into the living room and stared at it from across the coffee table. It represented years of hidden activity compressed into a stack of paper. Looking at it made something inside me shift. For the first time, I stopped asking whether I was overreacting. No innocent explanation produced 3 inches of evidence. That evening, I drove back to my mother's house. I did not call ahead. I simply showed up with the binder under my arm. Dorothy opened the door and immediately noticed the expression on my face. Neither of us smiled. We sat at the kitchen table where countless family dinners had once taken place. I placed the binder in front of her and opened it. Page after page, I showed her the records. Dates, addresses, signatures, financial accounts, connections that stretched back years. She listened quietly. Occasionally she nodded. Occasionally she looked away. When I finished, the kitchen fell silent. I waited for outrage. I waited for disappointment. I waited for even a small acknowledgement of what had been done. Instead, my mother folded her hands and sighed. "Claire has always struggled with money," she said softly. I stared at her. "That is your response?" She lowered her eyes. "She made poor choices." Poor choices. Once again, the language softened everything. Years of deception reduced to poor choices. I felt a heaviness settle over me that had nothing to do with anger. It felt more like grief. Grief for expectations I had carried my entire life. Grief for believing that evidence would finally change something. "Do you understand what this has done to me?" I asked. My voice remained calm, but it took effort. "Do you understand that my retirement, my credit, my future could have been damaged?" My mother looked at me for several seconds before answering. Then she said the words that finally removed any remaining doubt about where she stood. Money can be repaired, Nancy. Families cannot. I sat perfectly still. In that moment, I realized she was not defending what had happened. She was defending who had done it. And as painful as that truth was, it gave me something valuable. It ended the last hope that someone else would fix this for me. After that conversation, something inside me became remarkably calm. Not because the situation had improved, but because uncertainty had finally disappeared. For weeks I had been trying to understand who knew what, who was telling the truth, and whether there was some explanation I had overlooked. Now I knew exactly where everyone stood. The investigation continued moving forward, and for the first time I stopped trying to shield people from the consequences of their own decisions. A few days later, Michael Hayes called with an update. Several records had been verified, and additional documentation was being reviewed. He could not discuss every detail yet, but he confirmed that the matter was being taken seriously. When the call ended, I felt something I had not experienced since this ordeal began: relief. Not because the problem was solved, but because it was finally being examined by people who dealt in facts rather than excuses. Meanwhile, word began spreading through the family. I never made announcements. I never posted anything online. Information simply traveled the way it always does in families. One cousin called to ask if I was all right. An aunt left a voicemail expressing concern. Even relatives I had not spoken with in months suddenly seemed aware that something serious was happening. The reactions varied. Some quietly offered support. Others encouraged me to let everything go for the sake of family harmony. One relative actually said, "Maybe there has been a misunderstanding." I thanked them politely and changed the subject. By then I had spent enough hours reviewing documents to know the difference between a misunderstanding and a pattern. Claire remained mostly silent. That silence bothered me more than an argument would have. No apology arrived. No explanation. No attempt to discuss what had happened. Days passed with nothing but occasional indirect messages delivered through other family members. My mother called twice during that week. Both conversations followed a familiar pattern. She asked about my health. She commented on the weather. Then she carefully redirected the discussion toward forgiveness. I listened without arguing. There was no point. We were no longer discussing facts. We were discussing expectations. She expected me to protect the family image. I expected accountability. Neither of us was going to convince the other. One evening, I was sitting on my front porch watching the sunset when a vehicle slowly pulled into my driveway. My stomach tightened the moment I recognized it. Claire stepped out and stood beside her car. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. She looked older than I remembered, tired, nervous. The confident sister I had known all my life seemed strangely absent. She walked toward the porch and stopped several feet away. "Nancy," she said quietly. I did not answer immediately. The summer air felt still and heavy around us. Finally, I nodded. "Claire." She looked down at the wooden steps before meeting my eyes again. "I think we need to talk." There were dozens of things I could have said in that moment. Questions, accusations, demands for answers. Instead, I simply studied her face. For the first time since everything began, the person at the center of the storm was standing directly in front of me. And something in her expression made me realize this conversation was not going to unfold the way either of us expected. Claire remained standing near the edge of the porch while the evening light faded around us. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear distant traffic from the main road and the soft rustling of leaves in the trees across the street. Finally, she took a slow breath and sat down in the chair opposite mine. She looked exhausted, not the kind of tired that comes from a bad night of sleep, but the kind that settles into a person after years of carrying something they never intended to reveal. "I know what you think of me right now," she said quietly. I folded my hands in my lap. "I am not interested in guessing. I am interested in hearing the truth." She looked away. The silence stretched between us. Then she nodded. "Fair enough." What followed was not the dramatic confession I had expected. There were no sudden emotional outbursts. No shocking revelations delivered all at once. Instead, the story emerged slowly, piece by piece. Financial trouble had started years earlier. One bad decision had led to another. Temporary solutions became permanent habits. Debts accumulated. Opportunities to come clean were ignored. Every time a problem appeared, someone helped her escape the immediate consequences. Sometimes it was my mother. Sometimes it was another relative. Sometimes it was simply luck. As Claire spoke, I realized something important. She spent a great deal of time explaining how difficult her circumstances had been. She spent very little time explaining why my information had become part of the solution. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" I asked. Her eyes lowered toward the porch floor. "I thought I could fix everything before you found out." The answer did not surprise me. It was the same logic people use when small secrets grow into disasters. They convince themselves that tomorrow will be easier than today. Then tomorrow becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. Eventually, the truth develops a life of its own. We talked for nearly an hour. Throughout the conversation, I noticed something strange. Claire seemed less worried about what had happened and more worried about what would happen next. She repeatedly asked whether there was a way to stop the investigation, whether reports could be withdrawn, whether discussions could remain private. Each question revealed more than she probably intended. Near the end of the conversation, she looked directly at me. "Mom is terrified this family is going to fall apart." I considered that for a moment. Then I answered honestly. Families do not fall apart because someone tells the truth. They fall apart because the truth was ignored for too long. Claire said nothing. The porch light switched on automatically as darkness settled across the neighborhood. For the first time that evening, she appeared genuinely emotional. Not angry, not defensive, simply overwhelmed. When she finally stood to leave, I expected the conversation to end there. Instead, she reached into her purse and removed a folded envelope. Her hand trembled slightly as she held it out. "You should have this," she said. I accepted the envelope without opening it. "What is it?" For several seconds, she seemed unable to answer. Then she spoke so quietly, I almost missed the words. "Something Mom never wanted you to see." My pulse quickened immediately. Claire walked back to her car without another explanation. I remained on the porch long after her taillights disappeared down the street, staring at the envelope resting in my hands and wondering what secret could possibly be important enough for both my sister and my mother to fear it being discovered. After Claire left, I carried the envelope inside and placed it on the dining room table. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Whatever was inside had been important enough for my sister to keep hidden and important enough for my mother to fear its discovery. Slowly, I opened the seal and removed the contents. The first item was a letter written in my mother's handwriting. The date at the top stopped me immediately. It had been written almost 4 years earlier. Around the same time, the largest financial problems appeared in the records I had been investigating. I sat down and began reading. As the words unfolded, a picture emerged that was both painful and strangely liberating. My mother had known far more than she ever admitted. The letter described concerns about Claire's debts, conversations about financial trouble, and repeated efforts to help her avoid consequences. Several passages made it clear that my mother had been aware of decisions being made long before I learned anything about them. She had not known every detail, but she had known enough to understand that serious lines were being crossed. Near the end of the letter, one sentence held my attention longer than all the others. She wrote that she hoped the truth would never reach me because she feared I would finally stop protecting the family. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I set the letter down and looked out the window. For most of my life, I believed my role in the family was to keep peace. If there was conflict, I helped resolve it. If there was a crisis, I helped manage it. If someone needed support, I provided it. Without realizing it, I had become the person expected to absorb the consequences of other people's choices. Suddenly, many years of confusion made sense. The next morning, I contacted Michael Hayes and informed him that I intended to continue cooperating fully with the investigation. There would be no attempts to halt the process, no requests to make exceptions, no efforts to hide facts. Whatever conclusions emerged would emerge honestly. The weeks that followed brought gradual resolution. Records were reviewed. Accounts were examined. Corrections began moving through official channels. The process was not fast, but it moved steadily forward. During that time, my relationship with both Claire and my mother changed. We still spoke occasionally, but something fundamental had shifted. The old expectations no longer existed. I was no longer carrying responsibilities that belonged to other people. One afternoon, several months later, I sat on my front porch with a fresh cup of coffee and watched the neighborhood come to life. Children rode bicycles down the sidewalk. A dog barked in the distance. The maple tree in my yard swayed gently in the breeze. It was the same view I had seen thousands of times before, yet it felt different. Lighter somehow. Claire eventually accepted responsibility for her decisions. My mother continued wishing the family could return to the way things had been, but I understood something she never fully did. Returning to the way things had been was never the answer. The way things had been was what allowed the problem to grow. Real peace required truth. Real peace required boundaries. Most importantly, real peace required self-respect. I folded the old letter and placed it back inside the envelope before storing it away. Not because I wanted to forget what happened, but because I no longer needed to carry it every day. Some people believe forgiveness means pretending the past never occurred. I learned something different. Forgiveness can exist alongside accountability. Compassion can exist alongside boundaries. And loving your family does not require sacrificing yourself to protect their mistakes. As the morning sun warmed the porch, I took a slow sip of coffee and smiled for the first time in a very long while. My future no longer belonged to secrets. It belonged to me.